when you open the door for somebody else.
Welcome into the Vaccine Conversation with Melissa and Dr. Bob. It's good to be back again. These are the first several episodes of season 2, and I'm kind of still, excited that we're back into this. And
it's exciting to be back. There's just always so much going on when you take time away that I always write down this long list of things we need to be covering. And then sometimes some of that stuff comes and goes and you're thinking, oh, it doesn't make sense now anyway. So we'll just come up with some new things to do. But we are doing some really great stuff this season. I'm so excited. We've already had a great interview, and we've got great interviews coming up with people that are making a difference in this movement. Some will be people you don't know, and some will be people that you do. Yeah. And that's what I love about it. But I guarantee the people that you do know, you will hear things you've never known from them. And I think that's what makes it the difference for this season for us. And what I really want to do is just keep bringing you guys stuff that you haven't seen, you haven't heard, and that we find interesting and compelling to you. But today's episode is really kind of just going to be a little light in that sense.
We never know exactly what order we're going to publish these in, and timing wise, we just finished our Dustin Barton case, and I just want to give that a little reference because I am still emotionally reeling from that. I don't know. I'm just still flooded with emotions from that. It's just so hard to let that go. So we chose to go with something a little bit lighter. Yeah. So this is like a lighter, kind of an easier topic, just more of a conversation. And I don't know. We'll see if we are smiling by the end of this or.
So what we wanted to talk about today was
it's hard to do this.
Yeah.
It's hard. You think we could just do this and move on, but knowing that there's other Dustins out there. And that there will be more Dustins next week and next year. Just breaks my heart. Okay, but go.
Okay, so I'll start this off. It's a little easier for me regarding that last case because I've been sitting with it for a month. And a little more than a month, I found this case and had gone into it and really delved in and I felt all these things. But for Dr. Bob, it was relatively new for him to really understand the extent of the emotional nature of that case. And so he's still in that moment I've been able to process already. So I will help move into the next topic for you while you take a few breaths.
You think we could just pause the podcast and take a break? But no, I think it's going to be a few hours for me to get over that. So we'll do that
hopefully a few days even. It's a sign that you care. It's a good thing. So what we wanted to just kind of talk about today, not super long, but we had an interview, mainly Dr. Bob had an interview with a writer at the LA Times, and she came down from Sacramento, where she is stationed, to interview Dr. Bob, the person, the character, the controversial being in these vaccine debates, and had an almost 4-hour interview in person, which, as you remember from season 1, the end of season 1, listeners, you know that that's not something Dr. Bob really wanted to ever do. And he was uncertain with the idea of being vulnerable and letting the media in to talk about his story because they have been so cruel in the past. And as we know, media can always take anything you say and use that out of context and paint a picture a certain way. But as I may have mentioned in my slightly dramatic appeal to you in that end of that episode, I forget which episode that was, but I'm sure most listeners know.
Yeah.
I said, you know what? It's already bad. And it's not really like it can get that much worse. What if there is a chance that you can say something and you can at least start to take control of your own narrative? We're not talking about manipulating a narrative. We're talking about this is your story. For them to be telling your story and telling it incorrectly is wrong. And so at some point, you have to, quote unquote, correct the record and put yourself out there, even with the risk that it could be used against you. And I just knew if you could get one quote in there that really tells what's going on, an educated, intelligent reader who has kind of been following this might be able to understand that there is another side to this. And I am so happy you eventually decided to do it, which with somebody who I think was the right choice.
Yeah. Looking back at this, I am very glad that I did it. And I appreciate, you spent a couple hours on the phone with the reporter before I talked to her, kind of getting to know her, vetting her, kind of feeling out what she was all about and seeing what you thought. And I read some of her earlier pieces before I said yes. I read some of her earlier work, and I found that she's like one of those old-fashioned reporters that just reports the facts, will give both sides of the story, will quote everybody, but it's not like, she'll give one of my facts and then counter it with her own opinion, or like shoot me down and call me absurd. Right. She's just a reporter that is telling a story and telling both sides of the story. But
having said that, I will say what looks like, and her and I have had this discussion, what looks like fair and balanced today is a little different than what I think and what most of us think fair and balanced used to be.
Right.
So there is such thing as saying, here's a fact on this side and here's a fact on this side, and you, the reader, make the choice. And there is another thing where you put your fact here, but the final thought is the fact of the mainstream. And so you leave the reader with that impression, or maybe there are ways to be slightly misleading or ways to slightly drum up the hostility a little bit, like just key phrases and words and things. You often see the word anti-vaxxer in a headline to get people to click. And luckily this one didn't have that. But this idea of what's fair and balanced, this is about as fair and balanced as it could ever be right now. Right.
And I got a lot of emails from people, actually also saying, that's sort of their take on the article. They thanked me for doing it. They could see I was fair and balanced. It wasn't supportive of me in any way. Right. It was just, and I still don't know how, what Melody Gutierrez, the writer, what she thinks about me or vaccines, because she doesn't say. And
right.
But I think it's clear that she's willing to simply report on something.
Well, I would say a lot of people have commented to me, oh, this, there are so many things in here that aren't accurate, and you've got quotes from other people that are saying things that are not accurate. So it's not so much her that's inaccurate, it's what's being said on the other side of this. And that's her job, to report both sides. So some people were still totally not happy with it.
Yeah.
But I will say, she was willing to give you a chance to get to know you, at least for the interview, and let you have your time to answer things thoughtfully. Mm-hmm. And she didn't push your questioning. She didn't attack you. She didn't try to strong arm you into saying certain things or whatever. And
right. No, you're totally right. And I've had that.
Right.
I've had that from reporters.
Yes.
And I appreciate you, you sat in on the interview with me for all those hours and
for my one sentence. I got one sentence in there, guys. It was exciting.
Well, it was all about me.
It was. Right? No, you're right. I didn't even think I needed to be there. I was flattered that she wanted to include me.
And I'm glad you were there. And you and I, we shared so many of our views and like data and information, and Melody really didn't make the story about that. It's more just about you, the person. Right. And so she kind of left out what I thought was some amazing points you and I had both made about, why mandatory vaccination is wrong. But anyway, let's jump in. What is
you want to read it?
It's a long story. No, we can't just read the whole story.
Do you want to read parts of it?
But I also want to say, I pretty much will never. I ignore all reporters when they contact me. There's certain ones that contact me repeatedly, even though I know they hate me, and I just ignore. I don't even answer them. But Melody, since she's at least being willing to be neutral, even though she's not supportive of me in any way.
She's been respectful too.
Yeah. I've answered her again for another story, and she quoted me again, yesterday in an online story, a follow-up story. Mm-hmm. So it's at least nice to feel comfortable about that. But
you're welcome for pushing you to at least have that. Let's read the title so people know how to look this up.
Yeah. So LA Times, it's Dr. Bob Sears' views on vaccines have inspired loyal followers and a crush of criticism. And
this was September 3rd, 2019.
Yeah, LA Times. And I know if you Google search the title, you'll be able to read the article on Google. I think sometimes if you go straight to LA Times, you have to be a subscriber to read it, but you can still read it just through a simple Google search.
What do you think is okay? So if you don't want to necessarily read parts, but what were your favorite parts that were discussed and brought up?
I kind of find it interesting. She calls my office a hub in a nationwide movement that the medical establishment contends is a threat to public health. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of funny. I mean, I honestly never thought of my office as a hub of anything other than I'm just there seeing patients, and it's interesting that her perception is that there's this nationwide movement, and like that this little tiny office in little Capistrano Beach, California, is a hub of that. It's a small
office. It's a pretty small office.
Yeah, it is. But I like how she said like the office doesn't have, I don't know where she said it. She says something like the office doesn't have all the accoutrements you'd expect for such a hugely controversial doctor or someone who's out there trying to change the world. Everything's kind of very sparse and low key, and it had like some footprints or things like that on the wall or something. She kind of described what the office looked like. Yeah, but I mean, am I the hub of a nationwide movement? I don't know. I guess. I mean, I kind of feel like I do feel like it's my mission again to make sure every single person in the world receives undoctored, informed consent when it comes to vaccination, so they can make sure they're making an informed decision. That's my whole goal. And if I would almost feel like just myself is more the hub of that. To me, like my office is more. Outside of that, I'm just there providing medical care. I'm not
because you're speaking out separately as something totally different than that. Well, it's funny how I appreciate how she says your practice caters to parents the public labels as anti-vaxxers. I appreciate that she says that instead of saying caters to parents
who are
largely anti-vaxxers. She said parents the public largely labels as anti-vaxxers. And then she says people who no longer trust the scientists. And I'm like, wait, where is she going with this? But she says people who no longer trust the scientists, doctors, or government representatives who say vaccines are safe and that the risk of disease is greater than the chance of an adverse reaction. She's not saying these parents don't trust science or don't trust the government. She's saying don't trust the people in those fields that only say vaccines are safe and that only say that the disease is greater than the risk of an adverse reaction. So I can kind of appreciate looking through a second time, because the first time, of course, as my first instinct is to sort of fall all the things like, wait, that's not totally true. That's not totally true. But now as I go through, I can see that the tone of it still allows for some respect. And I hope that comes from the fact that she was able to spend time with us understanding our stories and, other parents like me that have contacted her, kind of giving the respect to the opposition a little bit, which I thought that was nice.
Yeah. And I kind of find it interesting what she says about me. And you've said this about me, that I give parents something they desperately crave. A kind smile and an acknowledgement that it's okay for them to trust their intuition. And I mean, you've kind of said that I kind of sort of give off that kind, friendly vibe to the kids, and I'm, very friendly towards the kids. Yeah, very welcoming.
Yes.
And it's kind of interesting that she, she didn't make this just all about the medicine and the science about it. She's kind of like trying to paint,
I think, for
a
sure,
personal picture of it.
I mean, even at the beginning when it says, let's see. It says, where she's kind of just describing you and how you treat people and how people feel about you. So that is a positive thing, because that's the truth, though. I mean, everybody knows that. Like, that's just common knowledge that kids love you, their parents feel comfortable with you. I mean, I have never heard one of your patients that I've come across ever be like, I don't really like to, everybody just speaks so highly.
There's been a couple. There's been two.
Yeah. Last week.
They let us know. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's nice to know that you are, most doctors are quick and fast with their patients, and you don't really feel like you ever get to know them or that they care about you. And I think that's one thing that you do better than most, is that people feel like you really care and that their family is like a part of your extended family.
Yeah.
And I think that is exactly why so many are going to bat for you, because I can tell you 100% for certain, I would not be doing any of this work for our previous pediatrician. Not just because of the vaccine reactions, but just the level of investment there is not the same. And so when you see people bringing gifts to your office and people that are up at the Capitol cheering you on when they see you, it's like, that's because of the effect you've had on people and the investment that you are giving to your patients. And that to me speaks really greatly about who you are as a person and your character. So for them to paint you as this negative person and try to assault your character, the real experience of your life with your patients just does not back that up. But you know what? Nobody takes the time to get to know you. Nobody takes that time to get to see. They're asking you for a quote via email. They don't know you. But when somebody comes and sits in your office for 3 hours, it's kind of hard not to see parts of your personality come out. And so I think that was nice that she included that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like how she just kind of talks about my patients. I mean, most writers feature me as sort of like the doctor that promotes alternative vaccination schedules, and she really describes it much more accurately. That people want to people have had bad reactions, so they don't want any vaccines. Others, are they're questioning if they should delay the standard schedule, or even with a new baby, just ignore the schedule altogether and not even get any vaccines. And the vast majority of my patients over the last many years are completely unvaccinated. And I forget if she mentions that later. I know we talked about it.
I think one of your quotes was included.
And so now, in reality, I'm much. I would say the only two approaches to vaccination I do in my office now, since almost everyone doesn't want to vaccinate at all, is they're either completely unvaccinated or they're coerced into vaccinating because they don't want to homeschool.
Well, I wouldn't say completely unvaccinated. You're talking about new patients.
Yeah. New patients unvaccinated.
You have a lot of previously vaccinated.
You're right.
Patients.
A lot of ex-vaccinating families.
I think that's probably the majority.
Who won't vaccinate anymore. You're right.
It's the next sibling or the next baby that might be.
Yeah, but then I think the only ones I do vaccinate, it's not even about following any of my alternative vaccine schedules anymore. Now it's about following a delayed, now I'm wanting my kid to go to school, a delayed school mandated schedule.
I don't even want to do this at all.
Right. So I'm not even, I don't think anyone's even wanted my alternative schedule or my selective schedule for many years in the office. They're just not vaccinated at all after a vaccine injury in their family. Or maybe they're a new family with a new baby and they've educated themselves about vaccines. They don't want them at all.
You've become a niche provider.
Yeah. And I'm still that niche for people that do feel like they want to enroll their kids in school instead of homeschooling. So they then want to vaccinate. So that's kind of really the only schedule I'm following now is the school catch-up schedule.
They talk a lot about your family in here, which I was kind of surprised that she talked about your family. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think she accurately kind of portrayed a little bit about the family, and I appreciate. She never ended up talking to my dad because he took too long to answer the emails. Oh my gosh! So the Monday before this came out. It came out on a Tuesday. The Monday, day before that, my dad answers my email. He says, sure, I'd be happy to talk to this reporter. Oh, and Bob, please give me a call. I want to talk to you before you talk to the reporter so I can give you some advice.
Already done.
I'm like, oh yeah, late. Dad, that's like way past. But, my dad's, he's older, gotta love him. But she did talk to my brother, and I thought kind of a couple of his quotes were kind of interesting. I think she gets later in the article, but she let's see. But yeah, it's. I think she wanted to give the context of who we are as a family and where we came from. But again, I'm the only one. People think my dad wrote the vaccine book. Right. People always think my brother, Dr. Jim, is the vaccine doctor. No one else would touch this with a 10-foot pole.
Oh, I'm sure.
They didn't want to go there at all. And it was me and only me, but I couldn't not go there. As I've said before, the events in my life made this kind of an inevitable course. Well,
I like how you're quoted in here as understanding that you said from 20 years of pediatrics and giving vaccines in your office, this is the single most complicated medical intervention your child will ever receive in their entire life. there is a reason you care about this also, as you understand how complicated it is. And, during the floor session in California legislature this last week, Senator Galgiani made a point, and I will bring that. We'll do maybe a podcast about some of the best quotes of those oppositional statements. She ended up voting yes for the bill, but she gave a really good point talking about people who are specialists because they have more knowledge in a field, and that we need to approach this bill that there are doctors like that, and that should affect. So they shouldn't be going after doctors like that. They should understand you as somebody who's done more research in this field. You're going to know more about it. It's the most complicated medical intervention for these children. Maybe another pediatrician doesn't look at it that way because they haven't done that kind of research. So you should not be vilified for knowing more, or attacked for knowing more, or vilified for writing more medical exemptions. You have a knowledge base that is more expansive on this particular topic than most other pediatricians in the state, and same across the country.
Yeah.
So it was nice for you to acknowledge that, and that come into the point that the reason you take this so seriously and do so much on this is because it's a complicated medical intervention.
Yeah. And I like how she acknowledges my concern that there's not enough safety research on the long-term effects of the CDC schedule. And I think it's interesting, most people would follow that up with a statement, but we know vaccines are safe and effective. We know, the schedule is safe, and offer some quotes from people who do say vaccines are safe. So she ends up quoting people, probably later on to talk about how they're safe, but she doesn't kind of counter that with a fact in quotes.
Right.
But Dr. Sears is crazy because, of course, we know vaccines are safe. Maybe because as a reporter, I don't know, maybe she might have investigated, maybe she couldn't find, the long-term safety research that I know isn't there.
I always find it interesting when they quote for the other side the same three people.
Yeah.
It's always Offit, Reese, I don't know how you say her last name, and Pan. You have the same three people that are always quoted. And I find that interesting because if this was such a mainstream, widely held belief system that everybody agreed about, why aren't there dozens and dozens and dozens of other pediatricians and doctors that want to come out strongly against this, that are well-versed in these facts? Why is it the same three people that are always attached to legislation, attached to vaccine patents, and that have vested interests in being that spokesperson? Like, it's weird to me that it's always those same three people. If we're the outliers and everybody else totally agrees with these vaccine mandates, then how come they don't have a list of 50 people they could contact at any moment for a quote about why the disease outbreak risk is so serious in California and why the number of medical exemptions is way too high? And they don't have the data because regular doctors are not doing that kind of research, and they don't support this kind of stuff as fervently as you see these three spokespeople.
Right. I bet it almost makes me suspect that maybe most doctors do know there's vaccine reactions. They want the vaccine program to continue, but they know there's reactions, and maybe they wish there were, people could give medical exemptions, but they're just not willing to come out and talk about it. Yeah. They're just going to let everyone else settle it, and maybe they don't want this system to change, but maybe they acknowledge there are problems, although that kind of doesn't make sense because they're all vaccine injury deniers in practice.
I mean, I just think it's funny, as a reader. If I wasn't even in this issue, I'd be like, why are there always the same people that are quoted? That to me means that it's a very limited mindset.
Yeah,
if you can only find the same three people to talk about it,
you're probably right.
Then you're not maybe representing the big majority that you say you are. That's my thing. Because technically she could interview dozens of parents that feel the same way I do, and that have the stories I have, because that's happening a lot. But on the other side, you always see the same people.
It's funny how my brother, Dr. Jim, talks about how I don't care what people think. And, Dr. Jim's a little more sensitive to public opinion than I myself am. And I think that's kind of one thing that I think maybe it's a self-preserving mechanism I have. In order for me to be in this fight, I really can't care what people think about me. I really have to totally let that go. In fact, I was having this conversation with Greg last week. I think you asked me, how do I deal with all this? Yeah, and it's just I I just have to set aside what other people think about me, what they write about me. That's why I don't read most things. That's why you always read something first and you tell me, okay, Bob, maybe this will be okay. Maybe you won't be traumatized, if you read
It's actually really smart. I wish I would have that same type of, if I were in your shoes, it would be really hard for me not to read everything about that's written about me, because I'd be so concerned that they are saying things that are incorrect. But I think I've actually learned that from you. When we 4 years ago first started working together, you saying that was actually like, it's a sign of maturity to be able to distance yourself from things, especially when they're mostly going to be negative and it's not really going to help you. It's smart. It's smart.
Yeah, so I think when it's like maybe I do care what people think. If they write lies about me, that really like annoys me, because I can't do anything about it.
Yes.
I can't, and
it's frustrating.
I can't correct it, so I just ignore it. But I think I've just said, sort of let go. I don't care that the medical establishment disagrees with me. I don't care, what other doctor colleagues think about me at all in this area. I really don't care.
But just because you understand why they disagree with you.
Right. Yeah, right. For me, the only thing I care about is that our children and our world are the healthiest they can possibly be.
And that your patients are well taken care of.
Yeah.
Which you do.
My patients, but, the whole world. I want to change the whole world. I want everyone to be super healthy.
I like how she says, and this is like anybody who knows you will totally get this, but she says, after talking for 4 hours, Sears remained as apprehensive and stiff as he appeared at the beginning of the interview.
Yeah.
And that's funny because it's an absolute nonverbal communication cue of how you feel having somebody interviewing you for this type of thing that has such a negative stigma. Like it's there, and you can't really, as nice and respectful as she is, it's hard to get rid of that. But then she goes on to really talk about the you, which is, but that's not the demeanor that parents and children typically encounter when they come to his office, or they run into him in the grocery store, or they shake his hand before a hearing in Sacramento. In those settings, he's engaging, smiling often. During checkups, moms say he makes small talk with children in a high-pitched voice to soothe them, and he lets parents rattle off questions until they run out of things to ask. I mean, how many doctors do that? How many doctors let you, these worried new parents, how many doctors let you do that? I mean, we're talking about next level patient care here. Regardless of the vaccine information, this is next level patient care. There is a reason people are putting themselves on the line for you and supporting you the way you do it. It's not just because you believe in informed consent. That's not it. It is so much more than that. And and you usually are that very fun-loving, welcoming person. And then there is the tension there about this and the media and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting, that parallel that she put together. Yeah. I totally get what she's saying.
Yeah. And I remember. Yeah. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to a reporter. I was guarded the whole time.
Of course.
I think I was open and honest, yet guarded because I knew.
Guarded with your feelings, your heart.
Yeah.
That's the thing you open up to everybody is your heart. And you can't do that with somebody who may hurt you.
Yeah, and I didn't trust her. I probably still wouldn't trust any reporter, but at least I'm now willing to talk to a reporter that'll give me a fair shake. But I can't skip over your part. She quoted you just talking about the podcast. Yeah, we're in 92 countries, downloaded nearly 400,000 times.
Which is so funny. She had to ask me for proof of that.
I know.
I had to send her proof because
it's funny, yeah.
Because her editor needed that to confirm, because just in case I was exaggerating to make our podcast look fantastic, more fantastic than it is. And I don't need to do that because we have the best listeners.
Yeah.
Honestly, every time I go somewhere and I see somebody who goes, "Oh, I love your podcast." Like, oh my gosh, we're such, it is, you don't understand. It is the best feeling. I mean, you do understand because you're in it. But people can't understand exactly how good that feels. And it has nothing to do with me or you or who we are. It's the conversation, it's the topics, it's the discussion, it's the whatever it is that people are resonating with, that we resonate with them. It is so rewarding and so fulfilling.
Yeah, I mean, every time I hear that, it's one more person that mattered to, and that it affected their life. And that they were, educated and changed by it, and they're just listening to us talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
It's so amazing. So when she's, when I'm saying these are the analytics that we've had over, I mean, listen, guys, we've had almost 400,000 downloads back before we had, we took 2 months off. It's like we were already we would have been at 500,000 by now if we wouldn't have taken those 2 months off on our trajectory that we had. This is the amount of engagement that we're having in all these different countries. This is real and it's so great. And so I was very happy to give her the proof of our amazing listeners.
Yeah. And it says, it just shows you how many people really want to have the conversation. She quoted you as, and she quoted someone else later. I'm forever grateful for each and every podcast that validates everything I've already researched. So I'm glad she touched on that, because I feel like for me, this podcast is by far the most realistic and accurate and honest portrayal of me and what I know about vaccines, than anything else I've ever written or spoken about or
plus it's a chance for people to get to know you a little bit also. Which I think is nice. And I think to somebody who listens to the podcast.
Did you want to interview me like we interviewed Dad?
Yeah, we will. We are. We're going to do an interview with you.
But it's interesting. You remember I came out and said hi to you and Melody in the waiting room. Right. I don't know if you remember this. She says I gave her a firm handshake and I held it just a little longer than expected.
But that's a sign of somebody who cares. That's a sign of an open-hearted person.
I know. That's kind of what I felt. It's like,
I think she's saying that in a positive
I'm not
way.
just me. Okay. Yeah. I'm just not just kind of meeting you just because I have to shake your hand. It's like I'm shaking your hand and
person to person.
Yeah. And that extra second is like, I care about this.
Yeah.
This is important to me. And you are now an important person to me, even though I don't trust you yet, but
and may never trust you.
So it's kind of...
And then, of course, she goes on to quote, like I said, Offit and some different people. And I know everybody gets really uncomfortable when they're, well, that's not true. What he's saying, Offit calls you dangerous. And you guys have to understand who Paul Offit is and what his interests are. Everything he says is going to be very extreme. Again, he was a patent holder in a vaccine that he believes should be mandated for every child in the country. He works with pharmaceutical industry and government agencies on deciding who gets what vaccine and how many there are. We know that there's a lot behind the scenes there as far as conflicts of interest and whatnot. And he's going to come out with anything like this. So, if you see his name, be prepared for something like this. It's not to say that maybe the writer agreed with that or that they're trying to paint the picture a certain way. If you get a quote from Offit, it's going to be bad. If you get a quote from Pan, it's going to be bad. If you get a quote from Reese, it's going to be bad. So just know that going into it when you're reading this, try not to get enraged by those moments. I tend to just skip right over those parts.
Yeah, but I like how she portrayed, the autism vaccine,
It was funny how she asked that at the end. She's like, I have to ask this. And
it's almost like we've talked about everything else, but the, most,
like, I have
most
to
important
ask
thing. Yeah.
And I was thinking like, well, I wonder what that's going to be. Because I don't hear this question really making the rounds as much right now as had been in the past.
I know, because for me, it's not at all about vaccines and autism. It's about vaccines and the, hundreds of other severe neurological reactions that you can have. And of course, some kids who develop autism suddenly, after their 1 year vaccines or after the 6 month vaccines, that could be looked as a form of brain injury.
Right, a neurodevelopmental disorder that comes from...
Or is triggered by, triggered at that time. And
the court does not see a rational distinction between caused and triggered.
Yeah, but she spent a lot of time kind of breaking down the fact that Dr. Offit says we know vaccines don't cause autism.
Right.
And then he says...
Yeah, this part was
interesting. But we can't scientifically prove that vaccines don't cause autism.
He said you can never prove never.
Right.
It's not
so I come back and say, well, then stop saying we know vaccines don't cause autism. You just admitted you can't prove it. So why do you keep saying it? And I think not a lot of people saw this, but a couple of years ago, Dr. Offit and Dorrit and one other lawyer were at a medical, at a dinner, and they filmed their statements, and they basically all agreed scientifically we can't prove vaccines don't cause autism, But you can't say that in the media because all people will hear was, oh my gosh, do vaccines cause autism? No, they'll hear, if you can't prove it, then that means maybe they do cause autism. Right. So the other lawyer... But that's kind of
the truth though, right? The fact that you can't say it doesn't means that there is, again, plausibility.
Right. But I think their point is, so the only way to effectively say it in the media is to just come out and say, we know vaccines don't cause autism.
Yeah, which is scientifically inaccurate.
That's the only media savvy way to say it. You say it anywhere else, anyway else. If you try to say it scientifically accurately, it clouds it and it causes doubt. So, and she kind of nails that pretty well.
Well, yeah, you said, it says people like Bob Sears take advantage of the fact that science can't be definitive. And you're like, well, if you're just saying that science can't be definitive, what's with this whole science is settled thing?
Right.
How do you have the science is settled and vaccines don't cause autism? And he's saying you can't say that MMR doesn't cause autism, even though these studies show you're not at a greater risk. People like Bob Sears take advantage of the fact that science can't be definitive. But you, as a medical establishment, are saying it is definitive. And that's the argument in general.
Right.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, you responded, he's right. The studies don't demonstrate a link, but he likes to conclude, we know vaccines don't cause autism, and I like to conclude that we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Is what you said.
Yeah, that was... So I think that's kind of it's so rare to see a reporter accurately portray what I'm trying to say. And I appreciate that about Melody, although I still, there's so much stuff in here she left out. I felt she could have done such a better job of portraying my scientific viewpoints and my knowledge base. But I guess maybe to her, this was more just a piece about, me, the person. Yeah. And then she said that's what it was going to be. But you and I spent probably an hour and a half in that whole conversation just talking about all of our ideas. And
I didn't really love this one where Sears is quick to fire back at allegations that he's to blame for any outbreak in recent years. It's the parents of his patients who make the decision, he said, which makes it sound like you're blaming the parents. He said, I'm just really the doctor that's willing to talk about it. But then you go into your clarification quote, I don't think any doctor could ever raise their hand and say they've never had a patient who caught a vaccine preventable. I know. I mean, that's true.
I know. People, if we as a public are going to start blaming doctors every time one of their patients who has refused the vaccines catches a vaccine preventable disease and they start an outbreak, if we actually start to cast the blame on doctors, because every single one of us out there, we've had a patient like that. We've had a patient who caught chickenpox and started an outbreak at the school. We've had a patient who caught whooping cough. Most doctors have not had a patient who caught measles. And so anyone who has, if we start to blame the doctors, then that creates a really dark precedent in that. No wonder doctors don't want these patients in their office anymore. If they're going to be blamed by the media and the public for every single case, then it takes away our ability to be objective and provide informed consent. And anyway, so, it's interesting that she kind of included that. To me, that doesn't matter, whether or not,
had a patient that
I had a patient that caught a disease, that shouldn't even be on the conversation. I think people are trying to suggest I'm not doing a good enough job getting my patients vaccinated. I think that's kind of where they're going with it.
Well, the idea is, if you've had a child that got chickenpox, well, then therefore you're a risk. It's like, well, kids get that. Didn't Senator Pan just say this week he wrote a medical exemption for a kid, one of his patients that had chickenpox? Some of these illnesses happen, but above and beyond, you've contested that.
And then finally, a writer wrote accurately about my California Medical Board case. And she wrote accurately again yesterday or the day before in the quote.
It was not a medical exemption for school.
Right, I know. It's refreshing. And again, that's why I will never answer an email from most of the other reporters at the Times and other national magazines, and just because they're just not worth my time. But
so two other things I did not like, just to put those in there too, and I'm sure people feel the same way. When you do quote something like, last year this amount of kindergartners had medical exemptions, and she says a 70% increase from 2 years ago, it makes people think like, oh my God, these are exploding and something has to be done. But what she's not including, and I have told her this, what she's not including is the fact that overall exemptions are way down, like 80% decrease in that same time period of overall exemptions from what happened from 2015 to now. So the amount of total people exempting from vaccines is decreased by over 2%. So the increase in medical exemptions being 70%, that sounds it's not really accurately showing the picture. It makes it seem like things are on the rise when truthfully they're on the decline still from 4 years ago. And that's
right. She did not,
counter that.
She did not give both sides of that, which I don't appreciate.
But then the other thing I don't like that comes right after that is this whole people say that you're financially benefiting from writing medical exemptions. And then, of course, your quote where I was like, this is not my favorite quote from you, says he has, quote, gotten a lot of new patients because of the vaccine law. But I think that was essentially taken out of context. Like, I think the whole point is you say you've always been busy. So yes, you're going to have patients that you didn't have before that are kicked out of doctors' offices that have real need for medical exemptions that will have to come to you because no other doctor's taking them. Not because you're thinking, ooh, I can start writing medical exemptions and make money. Like you said, you already have a full schedule. You weren't hurting for patients before this.
Right.
In fact, you've had to turn away people at times and not been able to take new patients or had to schedule people out, a couple months in advance.
Yeah.
Like everybody knows that about you. It's not like your practice has exploded now that medical exemptions are a thing.
I know, and she did not accurately kind of
your quote wasn't the best.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and I mean the reality is, I'm big time losing money by providing medical exemption care because what it's costing me to be on probation with the medical board and what it's costing me to defend my upcoming medical exemption cases, I'm losing money on it, and it's hard. Again, it's hard not to see these patients who need this kind of medical care.
What else can you do?
Yeah. But I get, to me, it's a sense. The fact that so many people express their appreciation to me, and I know there's so many people out there that like me and think I'm a good person.
Right.
I mean, that's very, I don't know, it's just a good source of comfort.
Let me read my favorite part, though.
Yeah.
My very favorite quote. During hearings on SB 276, opponents, many of them toting children they say were harmed by vaccines, hung on Sears' every word as he testified before lawmakers. When Sears interrupted lawmakers to counter what he believed were false claims by supporters of the bill, the crowds packed into the room would call out, "Let him speak." Afterwards, Sears was greeted like a celebrity, on a par with another staunch vaccine critic. Again, she didn't say anti-vaccine, which I love.
Interesting.
Robert Kennedy Jr. Some of the parents shook Sears' hand and thanked him for his commitment to the cause. Others excitedly pointed him out and snapped his picture. He is their doctor, even if he doesn't treat their children. That was the best line ever. And Melody, I give you credit. That was like a writer's writing line right there. He is their doctor, even if he doesn't treat their children. I mean, think about that. A doctor is such a personal and intimate connection. These people see you as that for them, even if they're not your patients. Like, what a huge compliment. How are you not like welling up with tears at that line? It is a beautiful line.
Yeah,
it's a beautifully written line.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate that. And I don't know. I mean, obviously for all these people that I'm not officially their doctor, I guess I kind of see myself more as their educator, someone who's going to, stand up for their rights and just trying to basically, again, make sure they have the information they need to make, the healthiest decision for their children. So overall, I mean, I'm glad in hindsight, I'm mostly glad I did this story. And again, I think this, we can thank you for changing my mind about doing stories like this. Yeah, I would not have said yes to the story.
But also thank you
not had that conversation.
To Melody for coming to do it in person, where she got a chance to really have a conversation with you. It wasn't just over the phone or over email, where things are just a little different. So I appreciate that too, and all reporters that would do things that way. A chance to really get to know you on some level. So I think it was good. Overall, I think I just wanted to clarify some of the points that maybe people were unhappy with and understand where they might have been coming from and understand the climate that we're in right now. And it's not going to be like some people called it a hit piece, a Bob Sears hit piece. I'm like, it's not really a hit piece. It was not going after you. It was an attempt you got a chance. to speak some things, and then some things that are already thought of you are mentioned also.
Yeah.
But at least you got a chance. A hit piece to me is one that doesn't include that other side, and you got to show that, and so I appreciate that.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you. And I've done 2 other interviews with 2 other writers. The stories have not come out yet. They're more like national online, like medical news magazines, and it'll kind of be interesting to see what comes of those. But anyway, yeah, thanks you guys for kind of walking through this with us, and read the article, give a comment. I mean, there's a number of comments on the article, but
don't read the other comments that are on there and get engaged in an online battle, because just remember, the people that tend to comment on these things are very, very extreme.
Yeah, but there's some good I didn't read the comments. I opened comments to see how many there were. And I saw the first one. Is a very good, very nice, happy title of a comment. But leave comments on the story. Give Melody your feedback.
Don't engage in an online fight with
give
anyone.
Melody your feedback.
Yes, give your feedback and then walk away from the computer. That's what I'm saying. Don't engage, you guys. Trust me. You'll thank me, because you'll have weeks of your life sucked out from you, and you'll be an angrier person. So just leave your comment and go. That's the deal. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, you guys.
We'll see you guys next time.
Yep, on the vaccine conversation. And anything else we need to tell people?
I don't think so. I think we're good.
Okay. I feel like we used to say so much at the end of podcasts.
Oh, it's good.
Okay.
They're good.
Okay.
You guys good?
We can keep talking.
Good. Nah, we're good.
The next episode won't come out for like another week or so.
It's good. Everything's good.
How about we just leave it rolling and they can just keep listening? You want to sing? Why don't you sing us a song?
Not good.
Sing us a closer.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.